All right, brother, this is going to be a fun one because so far our episode notes are most likely, guys, we're going to split this into 2 episodes. I'm thinking we're basically going to cut like halfway through and just say, hey, peace out, do our Patreon plug, and then just like keep on reading because we've got a lot to go over today. If we start all the way at the top, which is page 17, we have 13 pages, 14 pages of notes.
Well, to be fair, it's because we use the bullet points.
It is because there's bullet points. If you do a word count, it is 4,404 words.
Oh, damn.
It is a short book. Andrew, you've got a sweet quote for us from what looks like to be a novel. I am excited for you to share this.
Yes, so while you were busy delving through the wikis and doing what I would call real research, and I would say the quicker rabbit hole style research, I read a book. I ended up reading Leviathan to prepare for this episode. It was good. It's not the best Warhammer book I've ever read, but I wanted to read this excerpt for you. These monsters have not come to conquer you. They have no creed. They have nothing but hunger. They came here to devour you. People began to look panicked again, turning to each other and whispering frantically, "But know this, the Emperor has not forsaken you. He has given you a chance to serve, a chance to honor the debt we all owe him, a chance to grind these monsters into the ground. I have armor, equipment, and weapons, but I need willing hands. I need strong hearts. I need you." He lowered his voice, using the Vox grill to ensure his words still reached every corner of the fortress. "Have you come here to cower and bleat?" He looked across the sea of upturned faces. "Or have you come here to fight?" He saw some confused expressions in the crowd, and some people looked too afraid to respond. Then one of the local priests stepped forward, his skin encased in a mesh of rusty-looking twigs and tendrils. He was a youth, no more than 18 or 19, but he stared furiously back at Castaman, his eyes shining as he punched his fist in the air. "For the Emperor!"
And this is taken from Leviathan, correct?
This is from Leviathan.
Excellent. Who is Castamon?
He is one of the Ultramarine Space Marines tasked to defend the fortress, one of the hive cities there on Regium. This is their last stand. It does not go well.
We should also preface, every engagement against the Tyranids is a last stand.
Pretty much.
Not until we start encountering the 4th Tyrannic War are we going to get into engagements that are sometimes not last stands, because there's so many of them that it will always come down to your last person, and it will come down to your last effort. This is the reality and the terrifying knowingness that the Imperials have, is that they will probably die to the Tyranids.
And on that note, welcome to Talk About Tatooine. I'm Andrew.
I'm Nathan.
And we're here to bring, and we are twin brothers here to bring you what's new in nerddom and give colorful commentary on our favorite subjects, that being Star Wars and Warhammer. Welcome to our cantina. Grab a drink and settle in as we set course for realities beyond our own.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers, brother.
Today is brought to you by water, because it's hot.
It's so hot. I have a vicious flip-flop tan going on because
Nice.
I decided to do more yard work outside in flip-flops. I have a really nice pair of orthopedic flip-flops.
How fancy.
They support my feet. They're really comfortable. So I wear them while I'm doing yard work, which is probably not safe. I'm just going to throw it out there. It's probably not safe, but it's comfortable, and I'm wiped. I have just a terrible flip-flop tan. I barely made it down to the basement. Let me tell you what, I'm so tired.
Hey, but you're here and you're ready to rock and roll.
I'm here.
Andrew, we are going to be talking about I guess we originally titled this the 4th Tyrannic War, mostly because the 4th Tyrannic War is what we are currently in.
Correct.
Sort of. We're like kind of in the 3rd Tyrannic War because
it's the 4th one.
The 3rd one's technically not over. Keep in mind, the Imperium is engaged on multiple fronts here, so some of these conflicts start to overlap.
Gotcha.
And we will get into why that is a little bit later, but we're basically going to talk about the Tyrannic Wars. Not just 1, 2, 3, or 4, but 1 through 4 which is why this is probably going to be a two-parter, and we have a lot of fun stuff to say. So I would like to throw in some points before we get into the first war, just so that people have a little bit of context about the Tyranids. If you guys don't know what the Tyranids are, they are a Xenos race that is besieging the Imperium, mostly because of the quick, bright light of the Pharos device that was basically shot off during the Horus Heresy. And this was necessary because the Horus Heresy, the galaxy was enveloped in a warp storm, and they needed something other than the Astronomicon to help guide their ships through warp. And that also awoke quite a few of our Tyranid ships. Right. So that's where we officially see the hive mind as a whole wake up and set its gaze upon the galaxy.
So real quick, the Astronomicon and the device on Sotha, or the beacon, whatever, the shiny light.
Pharos device.
The Pharos device on Sotha. Those are basically lighthouses in the warp. That's what they act like. Otherwise, you get lost in hell.
Yeah. Speaking of the warp, Andrew, do you know what happens to a system before the Tyranids even get there?
I do. They usually get infiltrated by the Gene Stealer cults.
Speaking of the warp, what happens in the warp, brother?
Oh, the Shadow in the Warp. The Shadow in the Warp.
Guys, I served him that one up on a platter and he missed it. To be fair, we will be talking about Gene Stealers later, so you're not wrong.
In my defense, I'm pretty sure the Gene Stealers happened before the Shadow in the Warp, because the Shadow in the Warp is like, hey, they're going to be here in a week, and the Gene Stealer cults take a lot more time to develop.
Yes, but the Gene Stealers are not ubiquitous. Some planets deal with them, some do not. So
that's true. That's true.
We're both right and we're both wrong.
But I was still technically right, and that's the best kind of right.
It is important for everyone to know that being technically right is the best kind of right. But it is also important to know that the Tyranids, all they want is biomass. That is literally their main objective, is to gain biomass. Now, these filthy little buggers are pretty tough to fight, because they will throw hordes and hordes and hordes of enemies at you until all of your ammunition is spent and you are dead. Now, you would think, well, aren't they wasting biomass? No. The Tyranids are the best recyclers this side of the galactic plane.
Yes.
Everything that dies then goes into essentially a goop pool, and they absorb everything and they make new Tyranids. This is why it's so imperative that these conflicts are as short as possible, and that eradication is the only way Tyranids are defeated. Because if you don't eradicate them, then they will eventually get back up. Very similar to our friends in green skin.
The orcs.
Yes.
It's the orcs.
I was going to leave them to fill in the blanks, but
I wanted to spoon feed our readers, though, our listeners. I'm reading, they're listening. I have notes. It's very reminiscent of the Flood from Halo, which probably the Flood from the Halo universe probably got its inspiration from the Tyranids of Warhammer.
Yes. And you also get the Zerg from StarCraft that are also directly inspired by Warcraft, aka Terrans being called their main troop is Space Marines. It's not subtle at all.
So there's a rumor that StarCraft was actually supposed to be a Warhammer 40K franchise, and then they didn't get the license or something, and they're like, oh, I guess we have to subtly change everything, but it still ended up being super successful. So
yeah, I don't know. And who knows, the Zerg could be the Tyranids. They also could be the orcs. You're facing the general swarm enemy, and I actually no, I guess, the Tyranids have been around for a really long time, because we fought the Gene Stealers back in Space Hulk when we had a 3DO growing up. So the Tyranids have been around a very long time.
Yes. If anyone knows what a 3DO is, we will pin your comment.
Yes. That would be super cool. But that's basically all you guys need to know about the Tyranids, going in. We're not going to talk about specifically, who makes up the Tyranids, what their different units do. We can definitely do that in another episode, maybe for episode 80, going into Space Marine 2. Or I guess technically 81, because we're planning on this being a two-parter. I say this is going to be a two-parter, and we'll see. But you don't need to know too much about what units do what, because we're going to kind of open those up as we go. We're going to talk about a few specific enemies throughout. But it is important to know that the Tyrannic Wars 1 through 4 span just over 250 years. So the Imperium is dealing with these guys for a long time. And that's actually the nice thing about reading through a lot of this on the wiki, is that I had the opportunity to actually date check a lot of these and see like what years these were happening. Like I mentioned earlier, the Third Tyrannic War started in a specific year, which I don't have in my notes right here because there's 13 pages, but is open-ended.
Wow.
Like it's not officially ended as of the like what is stated in the wiki.
You have written that it starts in 41997 and ends in TBD, and it started basically directly after completing the Second Tyrannic War.
So close. So close. So that means our biggest gap between Tyrannic Wars is between the first Tyrannic War against Hive Fleet Behemoth and the second Tyrannic War against Hive Fleet Kraken. So just about 250 years.
So we should probably dive into the first Tyrannic War.
Absolutely. Andrew, go ahead and start us off.
The year is 41745. Hive Fleet Behemoth invades the Eastern Fringe. So these forces end up eliminating a planet called Tyran, earning their names the Tyranids. Seems pretty straightforward. The Imperials end up sending their forces for a fact-finding mission in the... Boy, howdy, these names are so stupid.
Stick with us on the sci-fi names, guys.
Lacrima Dolorosa system. I can't wait to have to respell that every time in the closed captions.
It's going to be good.
These forces began to discover alien organisms unfamiliar to them, even some mixed with Tyranid DNA. Imagine Tyranid DNA spliced with, like, say, orcs and humans. You're on the right track.
Imagine an orc horde, but like with Shadow and the Warp and also the power of imagination to boot. They're like, hey, we're like orcs with 4 arms, but we still believe blue is a lucky color. So
that's not good.
Absolutely unstoppable. It is an important note, guys, that the Tyranids, when they absorb the biomass of their victims, essentially, they do have the opportunity to take up some of their characteristics. So, like, Tyranids mixing with orcs, real bad news. Tyranids mixing with humans, really not that bad. There's some benefits to that, but like humans in themselves are very weak in the 40k universe. Tyranids mixing with Eldar, we will get into that later. That does show its face. That is a big, big, big issue for the galaxy. So keep that in mind, please.
So anyway, this scout force encounters a creature called a Zoat, and this is actually a model that you can physically buy. It's known as a Tyranid ambassador to the hive mind that offers a team up to make humanity immune from chaos. Reading this, I'm like totally tripping up because I'm like, how? So the Tyranids are offering, being like, hey, if you join us, like join our hive mind, you will become a part of the Shadow and the Warp, and therefore immune to chaos.
In this instant, the Zoat is not lying. Like it's like you said earlier, being technically correct is the best kind of correct. It does have a little bit of psychic influence that it's exerting here. So the human forces that it's talking to, the space marines that are in this expeditionary force, it is basically saying, hey guys, if you join us, aka if you let me eat you and all of your people, you will be immune to chaos, which is 100% true. Because if all of the humans are dead and they have a Shadow in the Warp ability because they're now made up of the Tyranid hive mind, chaos loses. So they're correct here.
Oh my gosh.
You get this like weird interplay where the Zoat is like aware of the struggle between humanity and chaos. I have no idea how. I'm assuming it like learned this when it absorbed human DNA. We got there somehow.
A little bit of clarification. The Zoat is actually not a Tyranid. So you know how that, again, I'm going back to Halo analogies. You know how the Covenant absorb species into the Covenant?
Yes.
That seems to be what the Tyranids did with the Zoats. So it's its own species. Imagine a centaur. So the general form of a centaur, it's a creature with 4 legs and a humanoid-looking torso, but it's the skin of a dinosaur.
So like scaly skin, but a centaur with dinosaur scales? Is that what I'm imagining?
That is exactly what it is. And sort of the face of an alligator, like a snub-nosed alligator. It's weird.
Oh, but a really cool looking model.
It's certainly interesting. I don't feel like this unit fits into the current lore of Tyranids, if I'm being honest. I don't think the Tyranids actually still use Zoats as like their ambassadors anymore, because that's not what the Tyranids do. I keep wanting to say Terminids.
It's okay. You can say it at least twice in this episode.
At some point, Games Workshop was like, hey, this doesn't really fit with the ethos of what we're designing for this faction. And I think they kind of got rid of them.
Because from what the internet is telling me, is Zoats are also old world creatures as well. So not only do they exist in the Warhammer universe, but they are also mysterious centauroid creatures of reptilian appearance that inhabit the deepest forests of the old world and practice magic. That is according to the general Warhammer wiki. So like Warhammer Fantasy.
And lately, I would say in the past, 10, 20 years of Warhammer 40k lore, there's been basically no crossover between Warhammer the Old World, what do they call it, Age of Sigmar, and 40k. Basically none. The only crossover between Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k is the Demons faction. It's literally the same box.
Yeah.
That's the only exclusion of that rule. So that's why we probably don't see the Zoats anymore, because they're like, hey, this doesn't really fit. However, we're going to talk about the Zoats' influence over the Lamenters chapters. So you had put in a note that the Lamenters basically took them up on this offer. They said, yeah, we'll join you. So they weren't eaten, but they were they joined the at least they joined the Zoats, which the Lamenters, reading into them, are they have a troubled past.
There's some issues there.
They're really weird. So this chapter suffered from what is called mental melancholy. So literally the entire chapter of Marines was depressed because it was a Blood Angels successor chapter that managed to cure themselves of the Black Rage and the Red Thirst by unknown means, and everyone distrusts them for it. The entire Imperium was like, actually, we would be more comfortable if you still had anger problems.
If you could please resume your cannibalistic ways, we would actually really appreciate that. Ugh, that's not good.
And the reason I think it's really sus is because the unknown means. So let's talk about the Red Thirst. The Red Thirst is their genetic need to kill and consume flesh, because the Blood Angels are basically vampires. Whatever. However, the Black Rage is like a psychic curse that the legions suffered when Sanguinius was murdered by Horus. Both essentially have the same effect that caused the warriors, the Blood Angels, to go into a killing frenzy, although the Black Rage also causes the afflicted, with the illusion that they become Sanguinius and that everyone they face is the arch traitor.
Oh, that is some sweet generational PTSD. Oh my goodness.
That is exactly what it is.
Oh.
It's important to note that the Red Thirst is like something that's like in their nature, and the other is a trauma response. A trauma response given by magic. So the fact that the Black Rage, which is, like I said, a trauma response, got coded into their gene seed, and then the Lamenters were able to remove that curse, it just reeks of the warp. Because how do you get rid of a magical curse? Magic.
That may also explain why the Zoat may have been able to influence the Lamenters, because they were already psychically susceptible.
Could be. So, and that's why every other chapter views them as suspicious. It even says in their wiki that the Lamenters choose to have a spacefaring chapter, basically so they don't stay in one spot long enough so the Inquisition can't pin them down and question them, because they're like, hey, they're loyal. They are a loyalist chapter, but everyone's like, hey, actually, if we catch you, we are going to torture you and ask you a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Last note on this little rabbit hole divergence. Also, it's interesting to note that without the rage, they are just left with sadness. The entire chapter suffers from chronic introspection, like, without this blood-boiling rage, who am I? It's like, I think that's really, really funny. Can you please get us back on topic?
The Zoat was exerting its psychic influence over these forces and was trying to convince the additional forces to join. Basically, it was saying, drink the Tyranid Kool-Aid as much as you can. Join us. Andrew, have you seen that meme with the knight and the thick dragon? And he's like, I'm here to slay you. And he's like, I'm here to ... reconsider. That's essentially what happened.
Oh, you're a girl dragon.
Don't look at pictures of the Zoat and then look at that meme. It's not a good mix. Essentially, the Zoat was exposed because the new boarding party was like, hey, you may have told us that the Lamenters join you, which could have been a lie. I don't know. I didn't read the book where it happened. But the Zoat was basically exposed, gunned down almost immediately.
I mean, obviously.
But being a vicious alien, it took several Imperial fists down with. This is going to be the tone of every single fight to come. This is a lot of foreshadowing, guys. The troops exited the bioship they had boarded, and the Imperial Navy opened fire on the Awakening fleet. However, the Lacrima Dolorosa system was lost in the ensuing conflict. Basically, every win that the Imperium is going to get is going to be paved in a river of blood.
This encounter gave valuable insights to the Imperium about the functionings of the Zoat and the Genestealer organisms and the insidious tactics that assail the Imperium. The First Tyrannic War also ended with the Battle of Macragge. So we're back to our boys in blue.
Back to our boys in blue, which will...
I thought we were done with him.
Well, no, dude. We got to keep the boys in blue in because we're doing all of this and lead up to Space Marine 2.
Oh, you're right. You're right. As long as I don't have to spell out G-Man's name a single more time, I'm happy.
I actually don't know if I put Gilliman's name in here once. However, we're going to see Marneus Calgar at least 2 times.
Calgar's easy to spell, so we can talk about Calgar all we want. Gilliman can go fly into the sun for all I care. I'm pretty done spelling his dumb name.
Anyways, after Andrew's done raging, we know that the Ultramarines successfully repel the Hive fleet, but at great losses. I can't tell you how many times I typed that into this document. They won, but at what cost? The invading forces were wiped out at the cost of the entire company, first company of Ultramarines, all veterans, by the way, and most of the 3rd and 7th companies.
This is not the first time that the first company is like completely wiped out in the in a Tyranid invasion of the Ultramarines.
I believe this does happen multiple times, and we're going to actually see across the course of all 4 wars that entire companies being lost to the Tyranids, and even sometimes entire chapters, is actually going to become very common.
Yeah.
Don't make friends with the Space Marines. Just assume everyone's going to die until they aren't.
One bit of lore that always bugs me is that, so first companies of every chapter are always in Terminator armor. And in the books, it always describes Terminator armor as every piece is a relic and is irreplaceable. And then they'll write about conflicts like this where they're like, oh yeah, we lost our entire first company, which means they also lost the armor. And they're like, well, of course we have extras. Like, we just, do you or do you not? Like, how irreplaceable are we talking?
Do you or do you not feel bonita?
I feel bonita.
Every Terminator ever. That's actually one thing I have thought about myself as well, is the logistics of Imperial rearmament. Because they do say that quite a bit. They're like, this stuff is precious to the chapter. And then everyone dies in it. And you're like, can we get a sit rep on where the rest of that is coming from? Because you guys are going to have a serious issue on your hands.
I would like a podcast episode just on the logistics of Space Marine armor and their supply lines and the Imperial War Machine.
You can write that episode by yourself.
Oh my gosh, no.
It is noted in the Battle for Macragge that Marneus Calgar did 1v1 a Swarm Lord, which ended in him being gravely wounded, only to be evac'd due to the efforts of a single human guardsman, commander of the guard, Aloysius, who gave his life in buying time for their retreat.
This is obviously a callback to the quote-unquote lone guardsman that stood between Horus and the Emperor, Alinius Pius, who, upon his death, steeled the nerve of the Emperor, who then used his godlike power to erase Horus from existence.
which now the Emperor sits on his golden throne. Very, very fun. With the end of the Battle of Macragge, we go all the way forward to the year 41990, about 250 years. We are now in the Second Tyrannic War against Hive Fleet Kraken. Now, keep in mind here, guys, just like the rest of our Tyranid engagements, the Imperium scores a narrow victory against Kraken. What's so special about Hive Fleet Kraken? This one has red armor. Anyway, as we go into notable engagement, we're going to talk about, man, again, it's the sci-fi words, man. Is this Eicher? Eicher 4? Eicher?
Iker.
Eicher 4.
I would pronounce it Iker, because Eicher sounds dumb. It's Eichar.
In the engagement of Icar 4, Imperial Guardsmen and Ultramarines, they are back again, forces quell a cult-turned-gene stealer uprising. They actually were originally fighting humans, and then they slowly realized that they were not.
Why do they have so many arms?
However, it was too late as Hive Fleet Kraken was on their way to Icar 4, overtaking literally thousands of planets on the way, literally having snacks while it was like going to murder all of the Imperials.
It's like a little Pac-Man running through space eating thing.
The most deadly Waka Waka.
I get that in an infinite universe and in centuries on centuries, a spacefaring civilization could colonize however many planets they want. But when humanity can lose 1,000 worlds and just go, oh no, anyways, it seems a little implausible. Space demons? Sure, totally on board. But the fact that the Imperium of Man actually consists of thousands of worlds that can sustain human life, even with terraforming, that seems outlandish. All I'm saying that it's a little unfair that we haven't been able to reach another M-class planet, and they have so many to choose from that it doesn't even matter if they lose like a whole bunch. I'm not salty.
Did you ever consider that, like, because in the beginning of all of the Warhammer 40k books, it gives you that spiel about how the Emperor of Mankind has the Astartes and he's the master of mankind, like king of like a million worlds, essentially. So if the Imperium is truly a million worlds and Gilliman only had 500, why were we freaking out about the fact that he only had 500?
Yeah, it's like, wow, he's such a good ruler. Well, maybe the million worlds is like not all of them are habitable. Like maybe the 500 worlds of Ultramar are like, that's 500 habitable worlds, because maybe some of those worlds, because I'm guessing they would go into a system and they're like, okay, we're going to go to this star, we're going to see how many planets are orbiting it. Okay, one of them is able to support life, we're going to colonize it. Oh, but there's also 6 other planets in this solar system, we're counting those 2. That would be my guess.
Yeah, maybe. It could also just refer to like systems, like 500 systems is a way bigger deal.
All I'm saying is that the most unrealistic part of the Imperium of Man is the logistics of it all.
The scale is, well, ridiculous.
The scale is ridiculous.
Back to our fight on Icar 4. The Imperial forces had to deal with the surprise gene stealers hid underneath the surface, who were hiding underneath the surface of the world, basically right as the Hive Fleet attacked. Basically, the Imperial forces thought they had cleansed all of the gene stealers off the world, and they were like, peace, we're just going to go underground, and we're going to literally let you think. They gave up their patriarch so that the Imperials thought they would win. They literally sacrificed their king in this case. I was trying to make a chess analogy. Anyways, it doesn't work. But they basically sacrificed their most powerful piece so they could just like hide. And then once the rest of their fleet showed up, they were like, surprise! And they basically overtook the Imperial forces almost immediately. So much so that the attacking Hive Fleet was able to get a lot of forces on the ground, including Tyrannifexes, Tyrannifexi, and Hierophants. Again, everything is High Gothic. I don't know how to pluralize anything. Anyways, it's sci-fi.
What are those?
Those are Biotitans.
Sweet.
Those are big honkin' chonkers that the Tyranids brought to bear against this world. So this was a big deal.
You can buy these, right? Like I think I have like...
Oh, like through Forge World?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think you can. I think I've seen them on 40K in 40 minutes.
Both of us go to the Google.
Let's go shopping.
Even my... Oh, Hierophants? Oh, those are cool. Skinny little buggers. It's like Daddy Longlegs, but with guns.
Oh, so it oh my gosh. The similarity to the Bile Titan from the Tyranids and Helldivers, pretty dang close. Just saying.
Only further reinforcing our tinfoil cap conspiracy theory that Helldivers is in the year 10,000 of the Warhammer universe. So
Yes.
what is it? We had Hierophant, and what did we have the other one?
Oh yeah, you can totally buy them. There's a Hierophant and a
Tyrannofex.
Ooh,
the Tyrannofex has a big gun.
I thought the Tyrannofex was a tank boy.
These are not as big as I thought they were going to be. Tyranid Tyrannofex is only $55 on Amazon.
I think that's one of their tank units. I don't think that's actually a Bio Titan, because I'm looking at their wiki page, and the types on here are the Hierophant, the Harridan, the Dactylus, and the Dominatrix.
Super kinky, but all right.
It looks very scary.
Anyways, let's get back to our current conflict. So on Iker 4, the forces of the Ultramarines, including once again Marneus Calgar, are assisted by the Scythes of the Emperors, Lamenters, and other Imperial forces. Having fought the bugs once before, Calgar was able to utilize his experience and implement effective strategies against the Hive Fleet. The Imperial forces were able to defeat the Tyranids, and Calgar got a rematch against a Swarm Lord and actually won on this one. But keep in mind here, guys, the cost of victory is always high. During this engagement on Iker 4, the assisting forces of Scythes of the Emperor and Lamenters were almost completely wiped out. Like, we are talking like single digits worth, maybe double digits worth of units left out of thousands, or out of 1,000 each of these chapters. So not a lot left over.
A lot of the artwork of Marneus Calgar is him fighting the Ultramarine, or is him fighting the Tyranids.
Excellent.
It's some pretty cool artwork, I'm not going to lie.
I'm actually really excited about our next engagement, which is the Battle of Eandon. I am super excited about this because this is actually when the Eldar come into play. Super excited.
Oh, that is the name of the craft world. So Hive Fleet Kraken also had their encounter with the Eldar over their craft world. And that's how you pronounce it, is Eandon?
Yes, that's how I have chosen to pronounce it, Eandon.
Cool. The Hive Fleet was so massive that the entire craft world was called to arms. They could not run, so they stood and fight. Every Eldar entered the defense as guardians, which is like their foot soldier, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
The Farseer Kelmon awoke the Wraith Guards and even brought the Avatar Kane into the fight. Love the Avatar of Kane. Anytime...
Kilamacha Kane!
Kilamacha Kane! Anytime I got to use the Avatar in Dawn of War, I was like, this is amazing. I love this so much. The fight began 20 days after Rangers first spotted the fleet. Tens of thousands of bioships assailed the craft world. Those seemed like great odds. Waves of ships were shot down by the Eldar, but their forces began to wear down. A Hive Fleet Kraken then attacked with just wave after wave after wave, bigger than any sent thus far, and then cleared the Eldar fleet, allowing, oh gosh, here's a word, a mycetic spores, basically wet drop pods. I hate that you wrote that. That's disgusting.
He read the wet drop pods. He read my silly notes out loud.
Allowing these mycetic drop pod, oh my gosh, allowing mycetic spores, basically wet drop pods, to land on the craft world.
The battle had officially come to craft world Eandon. Every force and square inch of the craft world was covered in fighting. Every Eldar troop had its match on the Tyranid side. So we had striking scorpions fighting Hormagaunts, all the way up to additional Hierophants fighting off Phantom Titans of the Eldar. Now, I don't know what a Phantom Titan is because that was just one of the rabbit holes I was not able to go down, but it will be later when we do an episode on types of Titans. So
it is, imagine a Wraith Knight, just taller.
That's fair. Word of the battle reached an Eldar Corsair, a previously disgraced prince of the craft world, and reinforcements had arrived. Iriel was his name, and he arrived just as Eandon would be overrun. Again, it's like Games Workshop cannot have people enter in the middle of a fight. They're like, no, they have to be almost dead, then you can enter. These Corsairs were able to cut their way through the fleet, severing the supply of troops to the surface of the craft world. So basically, the craft world was now momentarily free of Tyranid reinforcements, so everything they killed didn't immediately get replenished with more Tyranids. The fight in space was vicious, and Iriel fought back multiple counterattacks before winning the fight in space. Now, on his way to assist on the ground, Iriel made his way to the craft world to assist its almost wiped out forces.
I don't know that a lot of the books actually cover space battles with Tyranids.
No, they're usually pretty short. They're like, there was fighting in space. This side won, and then we go to the ground battle.
Because the Tyranids aren't interested in space battles. They're like, all we want is to get back onto the planet. And like, if their troops die on the planet, they can recycle them a lot easier. As the fight raged, a hive tyrant slaughtered its way through the Eldar, and their only hope was that the Avatar of Khaine would slay it. The Avatar issued a challenge, but instead was met with a force of Carnifex. These dozen creatures defeated the Avatar, and the Hive Tyrant continued to rampage. Iriel himself lands on the craft world, wielding the Spear of Twilight, which I have no idea what that is.
Magical spear. Don't worry about it. It's a magical spear.
Magical spear. Perfect. A cursed weapon that contains great power at direct peril to the user's soul. Neat. With the spear, Uriel was able to slay the tyrant and cast the Tyranids into disarray. Another hollow victory was won, as many inhabitants of the craft world, like we said, they don't survive. They never survive. Many spirit stones had been destroyed, and even the Farseer lay dead. This was found from the Tyranid Codex Edition 4, page 12, and Codex 5, pages 23 through 25. Real quick, the Eldar spirit stones, if I'm not mistaken, is like the souls of the departed Eldar that they essentially capture into a stone and they use to power their civilization, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, and the spirit stones are the way to keep the Eldar souls from directly going to Slaanesh upon death. So the fact that all of these spirit stones got smashed meant that all of those souls were released and Slaanesh had a feast. So like anytime the Eldar get attacked, it's like it's a feels bad moment because Slaanesh is just thriving in this chaos.
Right, because Slaanesh hates the Eldar because the Eldar made Slaanesh, and Slaanesh was like, now I'm gonna consume all of you.
I don't think Slaanesh hates the Eldar. I mean, they do because all chaos hates the Eldar, but not directly because of her creation. Like she's connected to them psychically because of the way the Eldar behaved in the past.
Gotcha.
Not necessarily like a specific grudge towards them, I think. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the Eldar and Slaanesh. If you're going to put that in the comments, though, don't be super horny, please. Thank you.
People are like, this is actually what happened. It's like, all right, so don't be weird.
Another engagement of the Second Tyrannic War that I actually think is kind of sad is the fall of Sotha. Now, Sotha was where the Pharos device was being kept. So the fact that Sotha, the planet that actually originally instigated the movement of the Tyranid hive mind, the fact that it gets absolutely destroyed is kind of sad. Now, this was a fight where 6 companies of the size of the Emperor were defending their homeworld of Sotha. So keep in mind, the size of the Emperor are a Ultramarines successor chapter. Their homeworld is Sotha. The planet was being plagued by Gene Stealer uprisings and eventually assaulted by Hive Fleet Kraken. Only a small number were able to escape with the Gene Seed in tow. Basically, they described Sotha as an asteroid after the belt. There was no life left on the planet.
So with the beacon, and with Sotha being destroyed, is the only light that's attracting the Tyranids the one on Terra?
Let's back that up a little bit. The beacon at Sotha is not active at this time.
Right, but originally that is what started drawing the extra galactic force of the Tyranids into the Warhammer 40k universe as we know it.
Yes, correct.
So they saw it light up even for at least a little bit, and they were like, cool, that's where we're going. But now that they're in the system, I'm sure that, can they see the Astronomicon?
So even after the beacon at Sotha, the Pharos device, was extinguished, they basically were already locked onto the Milky Way galaxy, and at that point, they were already headed in that direction. Once the light of the Astronomicon was present, they just had a new focal point. So it's imagine basically adjusting their view like 1 degree outside of their current trajectory, and they were like, hey, look, there's still a light there, and we're going to eat it, which is why over the course of Wars 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's why everything is converging on Terra. It's because they are like moths to a flame, and they are trying to consume Terra.
That's going to be really fun.
Yeah, humanity is effed.
So we're going to move on to the Battle of Mirrol. This is the last one we're going to talk about in the second Tyrannic War. So this is the escaping Scythes of the Emperor land on this death world. The remaining Marines, numbering only 93 Marines, 68 aspirants, and their chapter master, Mansirius Thorcyria.
I think it's Thorcyria.
Thorcyra. I'm getting real tired of these dumb names. Declared this planet as the location of their next fortress monastery. Specifically, they found a rocky outcrop against the jungle that would prove a natural defense point. Death worlds are exactly what they sound like. They're really hard to stay alive. Being an Astartes helps quite a bit.
Yes.
Even with steep cliffs and heavy weapon emplacements, the forces of the Scythes were outnumbered greatly. Their chapter master fell in that battle, and very few made it out. So they already were a very small world. They set up their base again. The Tyranids followed them, and then they got their asses kicked again. And somehow some of them are still alive.
Keep in mind, like, most of them still alive, a good chunk of them are aspirants. These guys, like, don't have, like, all of their Space Marine upgrades. They're not good at fighting. And I'm sure a lot of them are like, let's do it. Let's face them. And they probably had to. They were like, hey, I know your upgrades aren't good, but we need to give you guys guns because we're all about to die. And you know it's bad when the aspirants are sent into battle, because that is the future of the chapter, so that they can live on and fight another day.
So I do remember that in the first Space Marine game, you actually can use the Scythes of the Emperor colors on your armor in the multiplayer.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. However, let's see. So, like I said, their homeworld is Sotha. That was destroyed. I'm specifically looking to see if they got Primaris reinforcements. They did. So they actually did make it to at least the third Tyrannic War and the Era Indomitus, where Guilliman is running around handing out reinforcements willy-nilly.
It should be noted that the Imperium is really good at, like, making last stands, but they're basically making a last stand with a Thunderhawk running in the back. Like, they're not going to let the Tyranids completely wipe them out, because if they know they can survive, they can come back and keep fighting. They're not total idiots.
Let's see. So even, like we said, the Battle of Mirrol it's a total loss. The battle barge Heart of Cronus subjected Mirrol to exterminatus in an attempt to cleanse as many Tyranid warriors as possible. This is like, again, I'm going back to Halo. This is like firing the Halo rings, because if you can't kill the Tyranids, kill their food source. Halo is just 40k.
I don't think we've ever covered Exterminatus on this podcast, have we?
There's a sweet gif of it that I think I saw, and I'm like, oh, like I saw as like a 10-year-old. I'm like, okay, so Warhammer's super cool, because it's like a single beam of laser that like hits a planet, and it's like a firestorm spreads across the whole orb and just annihilates all life. It's gorgeous.
That's also because they get hit with a virus that basically turns the entire planet into flammable soup first, and then all they have to do is theoretically light the match. Once the match is lit, the planet erupts in flames.
Right. Step 1, virus bomb. Step 2, light that some bitch up. Yeah. The 40k universe is terrible and awful. But it's not really a war crime if there's no witnesses, right?
Not against bugs, no. It's just extermination.
Should have been made in God's image, bruh. The Scythes began a short campaign of hit and run attacks up until they got word of Kraken's halt of progress at Icar 4.
That moves us into the Third Tyrannic War against Hive Fleet Leviathan. Now, Third War and Fourth War, both Leviathan. That is important to note.
And happening consecutively.
Basically.
Okay.
This is where we start to see things go really south for the Imperials, because this war starts in 41997, only 4 years after the completing of the Second Tyrannic War. So the Imperium is barely getting room to breathe before it goes into another engagement. Now, keep in mind, this is a new battlefield entirely. First war, if we go all the way back, let me see, was on the Eastern Fringe. Second war was against... Oh, I actually didn't write what part of the galaxy they attacked. I believe this was a different... This would have been in the Segmentum Ulta, because they're fighting with Ultramarines. So still in more of the like eastern/northeastern portion of the galaxy. That's kind of where we're at. And then we get into the Third Tyrannic War, where basically we start to see the tendrils of the hive mind start to arrive in different places. The Imperium is very vast, but the Tyranids are starting to encircle. Let's start off by talking about a notable engagement, the Battle of Tarsus Ultra. This is actually my first encounter with the Tyranids when I was reading. This is also found in the book Warriors of Ultramar by Graham McNeil.
Yay! So good.
Now, when I was writing this, I actually thought the original Battle of Macragge was that fight, but I was like, man, this doesn't feel familiar. I don't remember Marneus Calgar being here quite as much as he was. And then I realized, oh yeah, it's actually until the Third Tyrannic War that this is important. So this is where we actually see Uriel Ventress enter the scene, and we get to play through the events of Warriors of Ultramar. Really fun read, guys. I highly recommend going back and reading that. The book is like 20 years old now, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty fun. So at the Battle of Tarsus Ultra, Ventress recruits a defense force that would be made up of Ultramarines, Mordefactors led by Chaplain Astador, Guardsmen including the Death Corps of Krieg, holla, nice, Inquisitor Cryptmen, and a planetary defense force. Cryptmen we will see later as well. The tendril of Leviathan arrived and immediately swallowed the planet of Barbarous Prime. So whoever was on Barbarous Prime, immediately dead, no hope. Now this scared the absolute crap out of the Imperials. Inquisitor Cryptmen wanted to burn out the next planet in the path, Cordellis, to prevent the Tyranids from replenishing their numbers after an Imperial victory in space. So the Imperials are fighting them. They're like, hey, great job, but we should toast the planet. The Ultramarines obviously took offense to this. Cryptman was able to subvert the wishes of the Ultramarines to prevent Exterminatus, and they actually went ahead and torched the planet anyway. So the Ultramarines were not okay with it, but the Mordefactors were like, we will happily help you burn the planet.
I can't believe I can't believe a chapter called The Mordefactors would be so keen to burn an entire planet to the ground.
It did not go well. The alternative to Exterminatus was actually a ploy for the Ultramarines to explode a refinery and use it as a giant space mine. The Ultramarines are actually going through the process of blowing up this refinery to kill a hive ship, which they actually do. They inflict massive casualties on the Tyranids. But in the meantime, Cordellis gets nuked. They just killed a bunch of Imperials, wasted an entire world for what? Like, they weren't able to make that stand. I get that, like, they needed to remove the biomass from the system, but it was a feel-bad moment.
Yeah. And this is actually a very common tactic that the Imperium uses, because even with all of their might, even with the indomitable power of the Space Marine, I almost said legions, not legions, and with 2 returned Primarchs, the strategy of war for dealing with the Tyranids has not changed. It's basically try to win, and if you can't win, cut off their food source. Because if we can starve them out, maybe that's our best choice. Even with Gilliman and the Lion being back on the scene commanding the forces of the Empire, they can't do it. They can't do it. That is how overwhelming the forces of the Tyranids are. And we're going to see a lot of that in Space Marine 2, especially with like the new updated engine that they've developed that allows literal thousands of Tyranids to be present on your screen at one time. I'm so excited. So excited. Woo, it's going to be good.
It's pretty insane. Now, keep in mind, just like the Ultramarines, between the First and the Second War, Marneus Calgar has developed these strategies to get better at fighting. So are the Tyranids. Basically, the Ultramarines try to blow up a second refinery, basically using it as a space claymore, and this completely backfires. The Tyranids are able to counter this and actually are able to decimate the Imperial fleet, and Tarsus Ultra completely open to attack. The Ultramarines are like, oh shit, we have to fight them back. So the Ultramarines are fighting valiantly, but knew their effort was in vain to hold the line. So while they're fighting, they have to come up with a new way. So there is a small contingent of Death Watch on the planet, and with the help of Death Watch, Uriel Ventress is actually able to capture a lictor and use its venom to basically make a new weapon. Basically, the venom of the lictor hyper evolves its infected hosts, causing them to mutate basically rapidly out of control, causing them to die. So they have this lictor venom, which Cryptman basically turns into a gene poison. It's all sorts of heresy. It's pretty wild. So they take this and they
get a lot more cool about experimenting on the Tyranids in the Fourth Tyrannic War.
They're like, we're all going to die. Who's going to find out, right?
Well, with the introduction of the Apothecary Biologus in the story and as like members of like the Ultramarines, they're basically like, hey, religious zealotry is not winning us the fight. Maybe we should try science. Maybe that'll work. Maybe the imperial truth. People are like, I recognize those words, but I don't remember. That's from so long ago.
Pretty much. With the Norm Queen as the target, Uriel Ventress and the Death Watch went on a Xenos assassination mission. They are able to board the hive ship, use the gene poison taken from the lictor, and fell the Queen. At this time, there were only 16 Space Marines left on the ground when the Tyranids began to turn on each other when their psychic link was abruptly broken. So all of these Tyranids went insane, started eating each other, and the Space Marines were basically able to breathe for a second and basically beat them back. The Tyranids were defeated, but it was only a fraction of Leviathan. The Eastern Fringe still remained under threat.
One thing that I should mention about Hive Fleet Leviathan is what their kind of key characteristic is they can adapt. They adapt their strategy specifically. The other Hive fleets basically are like, hey, we have one game plan and it usually works pretty well. We're not going to ever change. Hive Fleet Leviathan actually has the ability to analyze its food and say, what is the best course of action? So not only does it have the advantage of numbers and the advantage of size, now they're able to think and they're able to adapt. And in books like Leviathan, for the namesake of that book is based on that Hive fleet, it does not go well for some of the Ultramarines. The Imperium is now is backpedaling again.
Yeah. All right, guys. Coming up next, we are going to talk about the Cryptus campaign in episode 80. We are going to do a quick sign off. Then we're going to hop right back into the middle of the Third Tyrannic War. So keep in mind here, guys, as episode 79 airs, 80 is going to just be a continuation of this conversation. Thank you, everyone, to watching. Every single one of you is beautiful, handsome, and probably not a gene stealer. Big thank you to our patrons, Mike, Isaac, David, and Calmbrew. You guys are our biggest supporters, and you guys allow us to get this stuff done. Guys, we would really ask for your support in this podcast. Guys, it costs about $5 a month to join our Patreon. You get lifetime access to the Discord, get other unique benefits from our Patreon as well. But you guys should know that we don't have ad sales. Ad sales are like not a thing in the podcast game right now. So we really, really rely on the support of our patrons to afford our recording software, run our giveaways, which we're still doing our lightsaber giveaway. Guys, please enter into that. Support us on Patreon, subscribe on Twitch, and buy something from our Etsy shop. Those are the 3 ways to enter. And you do get a raffle ticket to enter yourself into a lightsaber giveaway. You guys have like a month left until we do that. So please, please, please do that, guys. It would help us out so much if you guys are able to support us over on Patreon for just $5 a month. We really do appreciate it. And until next time, the Emperor protects.